I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. What do Hot Wheels, Disney, Burton, and WWE have in common? They've all had Mark Michaylira driving their brand forward, with 2 decades of creative leadership behind some of the world's most beloved names. Mark knows how to make work that's not just bold and joyful, but rooted in culture and powerful enough to move business. My interview with Mark Michaylira is coming right up. But first, Mark Michaylira, welcome to On Brand.
Nick, thanks for having me. It's been a long time in the making. We were just talking about that.
As we talked about, but like all things, worth the wait. So, as we just heard in the intro, you've led creative for some of the world's most recognizable brands. When you're starting fresh, how do you approach positioning and storytelling so that a brand feels both authentic and scalable?
hmm Well, it's interesting. A lot of the brands that I've worked with, very, very well established, lots of history, lots of heritage, and it's difficult because you've got people that are connected with these brands and they have an expectation, they have a love, they look at these brands as part of their daily lives. So I think where I like to start is right there, like being human about things. You and I were talking about like what are the questions going to be like, and let's be human in this interview. And I think that's really the key of it is becoming human as a brand and telling stories that really relate to your audience. Meet them where they're at, whether that's in culture, whether that is what's going on in the world, but really kind of get an understanding of who your audience is, what that culture is, and meet them where they're at.
I feel like that is such an important point, and yet at the same time, as you said that, I kind of sit back and think, why are we still having to remind people of this? It's such. It seems like it would be brand building 101, but I don't know if it's not what the outside world thinks branding is. How do we miss our people so often?
Yeah, I know. And I think there's this, when you say the word branding, and I was thinking a lot
Yeah.
about this leading up to this, to today. And the idea of branding, it becomes this like, okay, I need a logo, I need a color palette, I need a tone of voice. There becomes this like systematic, I guess, framework that we all kind of, there's this preconceived notion of brand building. And it's all important. Don't get me wrong. Like a logo is important. I mean, look at
Yeah.
Cracker Barrel right now. I
Do we
mean,
do we have to?
I know it's kind of this like amazing kind of like case study that we can all learn from. That yes, it is so important, but take a step back before you even got there
Yeah.
and understanding the humanity behind the decisions that you're making as a marketer or a creative leader at a company. Really kind of stepping back, and it's about what people want and what people need. And I feel that there's a lot of brands that would not have gotten to where they are or made the efforts or the steps ahead or the mistakes if they would have taken that little bit of a time and kind of just understood who's really who's using my brand, who loves my brand, who's going to criticize my brand.
And I think if to stay only briefly on the Cracker Barrel of it all, I think we got caught up in the conversation of the logo as like this kind of flashpoint, but I think the real lesson is what you've just been talking about, is not understanding their people and thinking that there was, I mean, it missed in the brief entirely that who is their core customer today felt very left out. And I think it's challenging because I would guess not working on it or being close to it at all, I would guess that the idea was, yes, we know there are those people, but we, like many brands, we need more of those people or a different type of person. But I think they ended up throwing the brand out with the bathwater there.
I know, I know. But what's interesting is here's a opportunity for them to kind of reframe branding. What are they going to do next? Like they have an opportunity. Hey, they've already said it. They've messed up. They're going to go back this and that. But
Yeah,
there's this opportunity now, and I think that's one of the things from a leadership standpoint that I've always believed in, and with the teams that I've worked with, and I've worked with some amazing, amazing teams, is that we're going to learn from these mistakes. So let's take the swings because you miss 100% of the shots you don't swing at.
yeah.
And let's take those swings. Sometimes they're going to work out, sometimes they're not. But what do we learn from them? And I think brands have this amazing opportunity to kind of try things, get it out there, especially now. It's so much easier to put content out, to put things out in the world, see how they resonate with people on a very kind of small scale, and then you can scale that up once you have that data and that information that's coming from real humans.
I promise I won't dwell on it after I said that. But I wonder too, from your point as a creative professional and a creative leader, I remember feeling this to date myself. It reminds me of the Gap when they redid the simplified logo with the little blue box, which I didn't think was the end of the world, but the world did.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember because they had a similar reaction to Cracker Barrel. Like, oh, we're going back. We're going back. And I
Hmm.
wonder, as a leader of creatives and a creative yourself, because I know in both cases I've responded to, I really feel like the team gets hung out to dry there. Do you, what's the best way to navigate that with creatives, telling them their work is both valued, but we have to pivot?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a tough one. I don't think I've been in a situation as big as
Doesn't
that.
seem like a fun one.
No, but what I will say is, I think and I can get to this later, is that I think what the Gap is doing now is fantastic. But I think what the conversation is, hey, this is what we are. This is what we were built to do. We were built to challenge things. We were built to get information as creatives and put out there what we feel is best for the world, what is best for the consumer, what's best for the brand. And I think, a lot of times, creatives, we feel a lot. We feel everything. And, of course, it stings when, you walk into a room and you present something and it could get shot down. Or as an organization, you put something out there that internally everyone loves, and then the world has a different perspective. So I think the narrative and the message back to the team is, at least you tried. At least we took the swing. At least we did not just sit back and do what we just been doing for years on years on years, because that's not going to get us anywhere either. We have to take those swings. We have to try things. If they don't work, I think the key there is to have leadership that says, okay, this is not on you guys. This is on me as the leader. This is on us as a leadership organization. What are we going to do next? It's kind of taking, extreme ownership of those decisions as a creative leader, and supporting the team, and really reframing it as not a failure, um, but a way to learn more and do better in the future.
Speaking of big feelings, you've worked on brands that represent some pretty big feelings. It's certainly joy with Hot Wheels and Disney,
Hmm.
brands with an edge like WWE and Burton. And I feel like a lot of times you can get at from the client's perspective, from the business perspective of we want people to feel X. But sometimes it can be challenging to how do you create X in others? How do you create joy in others? How do you create that thrill with Burton? How do you adjust the storytelling lens for those different worlds?
Hmm. I think it's, you know, brands can't be everything to everyone. And I think that's kind of if you look at performance marketing and you just kind of look at a lot of business today, and it's like, look, we got to sell, and we need to reach a lot of people. But I think where it lies in telling those right stories is don't forget about kind of your core. I think, a great example is Burton, going back many years when I was there, is that, there was a core consumer, and there was a way that you would speak to them that was authentic, that showed that you knew what you were doing, and that you got them, you got why they were into snowboarding, you got the culture. And I think that's key. Know the culture and know that audience, and meet them where they're at, like I said earlier, where it's if you get too far down where you're trying to please everyone, your message is going to get clouded. It's not going to be focused. So I say start there, and then find those areas where you can kind of reach out. I think there's um, you know, we want to start talking to about our brand in a way that. And reaching people because they want to be a part of it, not because we're paying them to be a part of it, right? So I think that's really the key.
On Brand will be right back after this. Now, back to the show. At Friends Everywhere, you're bringing together cultural insiders, seasoned creators. I think this model is fascinating, especially as we see so much disruption around agency models where we've had consolidation, breakups, wind downs, spin offs. Talk about how this idea was born and how it works.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Yeah, the agency world right now it's a tough one. And I think here at Friends Everywhere, we're trying to figure that out as well. Like what's going on out there? Because you've got, like you said, there's big agencies that are held by holding companies and small indie agencies. Um, I think the founder, Tevis Houston, who started the company, she really wanted this to be an agency again that really was just it was about friends, and that's where the name came from, and bringing people together, kind of the people that we've always worked with in the past, leaders from across different industries, bringing them together to offer something a little bit more focused for our clients. One of the things is, again, we don't want to be everything for everyone. We can't be. We want to really focus on what we're good at and the things that the agency can do differently. I think one of the kind of like our one big thing is this idea of, joy and bringing joy to this process, because we all know this is really, really hard work, whether you're at an agency, whether you're in house. And Tevis always says, she wants to be the partner to in house agencies that she never had, the partner that she could call and have a real conversation with, and really get down to some of the challenges and some of the pain points that the teams are having. How can we do this together? So that's kind of been, that's at the crux of the agency model. Of course, we do, it is a full service agency, But we want to really make sure that we're not just an agency where it's, there's a list of services
Right.
and, you know, pick one and we can do it. We really want to hone in on and solve those kind of big problems for our clients.
Speaking of those big problems, we talked about kind of the disruption of the agency business, but in talking about where brands need to be today, especially brands like we've talked about with Hot Wheels, Mattel.
Mhm.
Um, how do you reconcile how how divided and disrupted our attention is with long-term strategy for clients and making sure that the brands are where they need to be?
Yeah, I think it really is. Again, look, there's so much choice. The world is a really heavy place right now.
Yeah.
People are moving really, really fast. It's like, the days are flying by. It's back to school. It's this, it's that. I really think it's getting back to really being human centered, you know, and what get to those human tensions, the challenges, the insights, really get obsessed with the culture that your brand can move. That's such an interesting question you bring up, because again, it seems so easy, yet it's so hard. And I think it's understanding that culture, meeting them where they're at, and really getting on focus, get focused on what they need in this moment right now.
Well, and again, I always say that I am bound legally as a podcast host to ask my guests these days about the role of AI in all of this.
Hmm.
And I mean, I think that's kind of a generic question for anybody these days, but I think especially coming off of what you just said about leaning into the humanity of where folks are, but also what we were talking about earlier with working with a creative team collaboratively, because there is a school of thought that thinks, okay, well, that robot with the quick answers is going to be there, and then they're not going to need Nick anymore.
Hmm.
So, how do you balance? I don't know if it's embracing that with managing some of the expectations around that.
Yeah, I think it's education, like anything. I think kind of takes me back to my professor in college at Penn State University, Lanny Simis, and old school creative guy. Came up and did everything by hand, and that's when like the Mac computer was just blowing up, and it was the tool for creatives. And he would drill into us, it's just a tool. Look, it's not going to make you a better designer. It's not going to make you a better strategist. It's not going to make you deliver better work. So don't rely on the computer.
Right.
I think it's the same thing with AI. And it's not going to make brands, it's not going to give them better creative. It's not going to give individuals better creative. But what I think it can do is it can be this amazing tool. And I think
Yeah.
I think we as creatives have the responsibility to educate ourselves on AI, how we want to use it. What is our point of view? One of our big things at the agency that I'm working on is, what is our point of view on how we use AI? How are
Mm,
we going to communicate that to our clients? It can't just be, oh, we're using Firefly or Midjourney or Chat, whatever. I really want to kind of create a framework that's like, here's how we use AI and here's the benefit. And it's
yeah.
not necessarily a thing that is going to remove. I think it's additive. So I think education is key.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I think being proactive about communicating the use of that to clients is key too, because I think, there's benefits that clients understand. Everybody is leaner and meaner. And again,
Mhm.
what we said before about the changing agency landscape, I think part of it is an adaptation or an adaptation to that. Um, but at the same time, I think people want, if they're paying an agency for something, they want the people to put that work together. They don't want the robots to. And
Right.
I think, communicating that and saying, this is, helping us to hone our brief, or with background research, or pointing us to some directions that we might go to better understand the people, what we've been talking about previously.
Yeah, I think it's. I look. I'm embracing it. I think is it, the Wild West? Of course. I think there's a lot of things in the world right now that are kind of the Wild
Yeah.
West, and it's like we're in this moment of change, and that's hard. Like no, like change is hard for everyone. Okay, I think that's just being human. Like we get set in our ways and we get comfortable. And right now, look, I'm uncomfortable. There's a lot of things going on. But at the same time, I think that this technology, um, again, if we understand it and we educate ourselves, that's where kind of the magic is going to happen. If we know how to use Midjourney in the right way, like what is it, what can it be used for, and what shouldn't we use it for, and also being transparent about it. I think one of the great things is that getting to just spitballing ideas quickly. It's fantastic, whether they're
Yeah.
good or bad. At least it's you could generate a page full of ideas in 30 seconds. They might all suck, but you might get a little nugget.
Well, and you and I both know too, those bad ideas that, again, it's gonna might fill up the page with, those have a role too. They
Mhm.
can be valuable to a creative in kind of the wayfinding process as well.
Yeah,
I like how you quoted the advice of one of your college professors, being one myself. It's nice to know that the advice can
yes.
sometimes stick around for a while.
Oh, it
What
sticks, it sticks.
what advice would you give to emerging creatives who want to make work that matters in, as you said, a heavy time, a fast changing? It's a hell of an environment right now.
It is, it is. Again, I think it all goes back to humanity and really looking at where we are as a civilization, where we are as a culture right now, and empathizing with that, and truly understanding what I'm going through, what you're going through, and use that to help craft your messages and your creative. And it's just, you know, there's so like information is so easy to get right now. That's another one. Just fill yourself full of information, talk to people, look at what's going on, and again, focus on what's happening in culture, and tie your thinking to that. Really get down to like what are those. I read this quote the other day. Actually, I was reading it this morning, and it was I'll have to come back to it, but it was so good. It was about it was a quote about Land Rover, and it was really interesting about how oh, here it is. So it it was talking about finding the tensions your consumers wrestle with every day, right? And draw attention to how your brand can address those tensions. Great marketing is rooted in pain,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I literally read that I probably this morning or the other day, and taking these frustrations that we have every day, and this will lead into kind of like I know you're going to ask me the question about what brand makes me smile, but taking frustrations and turning them into memorable extremes like that. I read that the other day, and I want to plaster that up on my wall because that's gold. That's the key right there.
Well, you set up your own segue. You're a self-service guest. So, Mark, what is a brand that's made you smile recently?
A brand that's made me smile recently, and I'll give you a little bit of backstory. So I live in Long Beach, California. And recently, the city implemented putting in compostable green bins. So you can throw all your food scraps and yard waste and whatever. It's great. They're going to dump it in the landfill somewhere, and there's going to be public composting available. Fantastic. However, what I don't think anyone foresaw was that the fly population in our neighborhood has gone crazy because everyone is throwing food and scraps. And so again, there's a lot of flies in my neighborhood right now. So my wife and I were on Amazon and we were just searching around like, okay, what are some, non-toxic ways, fly, pest control, this and that, fly swatters, whatever it is. And we stumbled across the brand that makes me smile the most right now. And it's called Bug Assault. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No, tell me more.
So Bug Assault is this brand started, I think it was back in 2012. It went through funding through, I think it was on Kickstarter. And what it is it's it's like a little gun, a blaster that you pour table salt into it. And it shoots out tiny amounts of table salt so you can have target practice with flies. And it is mind-blowing. If we're talking about branding, go check out their website because the next thing you know we were watching this 5-minute YouTube video on this product, and the branding and the storytelling is so incredible that our carts are full of bug assaults. And it's one of those brands that they just didn't take themselves too seriously. They identified a problem and approached it in a way that connected with people on a humorous level. But then there's this other side of it where there's this education component of it of, hey, flies are kind of dirty and look at why. So Bug Assault was kind of my brand that makes me smile today. Obviously there's the usual suspects. I could talk about Gap. I love how Nike is kind of going back to, brand. And I think a lot of brands are doing a lot of great stuff today. But Bug Assault,
I love, no offense to any of those other brands, but I love hearing about someone other than the usual suspects, and I can't wait to check out Bug Assault. Mark, where can folks go to learn more about who you are and what you do?
Who I am and what I do. I'm on LinkedIn. You can check out our Friends Everywhere website. That is friendseverywhere.co. We do not have .com. Not sure why, but I kind of like the .co.
Yeah.
We are here in Long Beach. And in fact, if there's anyone in Long Beach listening, we are hosting a event on September 18th here. And we will be introducing a method that we use called Lego Serious Play.
Cool.
And
well, you heard it here first, Long Beach.
Yeah.
Check it out. All right. Well, we will link up to all of that in our show notes, which folks can always find at onbrandpodcast.com. Mark Michaylira, thanks for being on brand with us.
Nick, thank you so much.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.